Hey everyone, as you might have guessed, we're talking about Clanne today. Do we actually stand Clanne or not? I posted a tweet talking about, hey engagers, did you bench Clanne or use him all game long? Is he good, bad, or mid? And got a bunch of responses as we can see here. And they were not very good. They're not very good. A lot of people don't really like Clanne all that much, but I do have someone here who might be a bit of a Clanne stan. Hello Septi, how are you doing today?
Hello, yeah. I didn't like Clan at first either, but he has really grown on me.
I also didn't like Clanne at first, and you can tell by this clip. Early game Mage, I think overall not the best long-term potential. I think almost everyone I know benched him, but I've seen like one or two people use him as a Mage Knight long-term with some success, but I wasn't one of those people. He's probably fine. I noticed that his magic isn't exactly the highest. In fact, if you were to reclass him into a physical class, he has better strength than magic, at least when it comes to growth. I think his bases are tied. So that could be one interesting way to try and make him a little bit better, but it's probably still not worth it. And early on, seals are at a premium, both second seals and master seals. So I don't know how viable that is. And overall, I pretty comfortably put him in C tier. But early on, I do think it's nice to have a mage that can hit armor knights. So why do you think people think Clanne is bad? Because I'm going to read out a couple tweets, a couple responses in a minute. But for what I can tell, people kind of like using him early on, but they're always ending up like benching him. That's kind of rare in Fire Emblem, isn't it? That people just bench a unit that they've been using.
Yeah, I think there's both a lot of easy mistakes to make in training Clan. His stat line isn't exactly intuitive. So if you're on a first run of the game, it might not be obvious what makes him good. And so it's just like, you give up on him for someone who it's very obvious to see if they work.
Yeah, I think a lot of units that engage have a bit of a problem with that. I'll start with reading some tweets and then we'll get into the discussions and like things that I think are interesting to talk about with Clanne. As always, I got out some responses from all of you. I got them balanced out a bit through like bad and good. From what I can tell, there's many more comments that say Clanne bad than Clanne good. But here are some responses. I benched him around Illusia. Having magic early on is nice, but he gets outclassed by pretty much every other mage, and switching him to a physical class isn't worth it because he's outclassed there too. Good to remember that one. I played on hard on my first playthrough. I tried my best to keep him on my roster, but his growths were just awful. Base mage with doggy doo-doo water magic growth, but good strength is certainly a choice. Overall, kinda poo. In my playthrough, he was quickly outclassed. His only pros for me were in speed, but high speed with little damage isn't gonna make me want to keep him on the team. Which sucks, excuse my voice, because I was hoping he'd be like the sleeper OP unit. Another one here. 10% magic growth go burr in a bad way. That's referring to his personal growth, I'm pretty sure, not his actual growth as a mage. Have fun training him to level 10. Starting at level 10, level 1 really hurts him because you gotta level him up. So much more than most of the early squad. While Lear and Fram don't struggle because Lear gets a free map of experience and Fram is a healer. That is just the early game. He struggles and falls off later on. C tier, in my opinion. I don't know what the context is of this C tier. For me, that'd be the lowest tier because I only have A through, or S tier through C tier for Engage, but maybe this person has a different. They also have a reply below. Any utility he may get eclipsed, gets eclipsed by others, just second sealing into any of his classes. His strength growth is higher, but his base strength is so low it barely even matters, and it's still 25%. Not even that good. He has some mage utility in the early game, but it's not enough, I don't think. And the last Clanne hater here tried really hard to make him work after the early game with giving him Forges, Celica, and even my first Master Seal, but he just couldn't keep up with other units. Dropped him around chapter 10 since Citrine outclassed him in almost every stat except speed. Definitely something we should discuss in a little bit, how he compares to the other mages, because he's got a lot of competition. There's some people who liked him too. This one, I used them both on a hard and maddening fixed run. On hard, he works fine as a Mage Knight dodge tank, with the only real threats being archers, since they are one of the enemy types with the highest hit rates. He is fast and he can double, but cannot reliably one round as an enemy. So, using him as a dodge tank. I'm a Clanne fan. In my current run, I have him as a sniper, and he has like 50 dexterity for some reason, and is really great at melting tankier enemies with a killer bow and 70 to 80% crit. So physical Clanne once again. I think there's another one in here somewhere. Honestly, I probably got incredibly lucky, but he's always been one of my better units when I use him. He takes a while to get going, but once he does, there's no stopping him. I find it interesting that a couple people are sharing their experiences on random mode, whereas I think a lot of people who are talking about how good a unit is are usually talking about fixed. But, you know, some people play random mode. I benched him early, but that was mostly because I used Saline and Citrine. I think if his first couple of levels are good, he can snowball and become very strong. Last one, this is another one of those, this looks like a, not really a physical kind of Clanne, although he does have like a massive strength in that screenshot. He also has 11 sword.
51 strength.
Yeah. This is what I did with my Clanne. I noticed he wasn't getting as much magic as I needed him to reclass him to hero. However, if you do happen to get good magic level ups, I'd make him a Mage Cavalier. Yeah, 51 strength is one hell of a something. I've got to wonder how many times that one's been looped. But yeah, lots of people, some people do have success with Clans. Some of them reclass them to physical classes. Some of them don't. But I think it might be best maybe to start with, you know, what makes Clanne stand out? What are the differences between him and other potential mages like Saline and Citrine? Because that was one of the reasons I benched Clanne, is you just get quite a few other people who can just do what he does. Aren't they just better?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the tweets did notice it. Even some of the ones that were calling him bad did point it out. His speed is incredible. Well, this is more a fun anecdote than sort of useful advice. If you actually compare Clanne's speed in the same class path as any other character at the same level, he will always be faster than every character in the game except one. That's not super useful because he starts in Mage, which is very slow, but it does sort of show off just how fast he is. His speed is incredible. As a level 1 unit, he has 3 personal speed and a 50% growth.
Yeah, that is definitely something that I've noticed about Saline and Citrine, is they both have some deficiencies in speed, right? If you're just talking about how a unit feels to use, Citrine gets doubled in her joining chapter of Pegasus Knights, and Saline just has that middling kind of speed that kind of has trouble doubling anything, but is kind of on par with the enemy, right?
Yeah. Meanwhile, Clanne is just absurdly fast. There's a lot of enemies he can double without speed stacking, and then with a little bit of speed stacking, like rallies and speed +3 and stuff, he just doubles everything, which is, kind of a useful quality to have.
Yeah, I have to ask this because the last discussion, sure, you can double with speed stacking, but we did agree that, speed is just one of those things where if you want someone to double, you can make him double. So how useful is it to have speed as your main stat? Why would you even want to be super fast?
Yeah, so that's the sort of interesting thing, and it's the difference between being incredibly fast and being just sort of middling in speed and being slow. Because it's really, really easy in Engage to fix one stat. You have 2 skill slots and 1 ring slot. And let's be real, one of the skill slots is going to be spent on Canter, so you're not using both of them. So then you have functionally 1 skill slot, which can provide a useful but relatively weak skill, and 1 ring slot, which will give you a massive boost to 1 stat. So if you have really min-maxed stats where you excel in one area and are terrible in another, you're going to be way better off than someone who has really well-rounded stats. Because you mentioned Saline before. If you're like her magic is okay, it's better than Clanne, and her speed is okay, it's better than Citrine, but neither her magic nor her speed is really sufficient to get anything done without fixing, and with only 1 ring slot, you can't fix both.
Yeah, to put it in very simple terms, you're saying you can't give someone both Lyn and whatever the best offensive ring is, like Roy or Marth or whatever it is. So you have to pick one.
But in Clanne's case, you just don't need to worry about fixing his speed stat. He has so much to begin with, you can just only focus on fixing his magic. Sort of. I'll get into why maybe some people go too far with that later. But it definitely helps him that he can double without a speed boosting effect. So you can use something like Celica or Erica, or even if you don't want to give him an emblem ring, something like the Lilina Bond ring, or just forging up a tome or 11 sword, compared to Saline, who's going to need her speed and her magic help. She does sort of fall short a little bit compared to Citrine in that regard, because she's the opposite. She completely dumps speed. Her speed is just terrible, but her magic is amazing. So in her case, you can focus just on fixing speed, which is probably better, but it's still something worthwhile for Clanne that he doesn't need much speed fixing.
Oh, fair enough. So Sailing is like the middle of the road between those two, with like completely min-max stats in that way. It might be good to consider that Clanne might not always be a mage because he does have that weirdly high strength growth for a character that starts in mage, whereas he has like low magic growth. You think it's worth like venturing into that, or should maybe go more to Mage Clanne because that is like his main class, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth talking about the physical stuff. People do, I think, undersell his physical stats a lot and saying, oh, he's worse in the physical classes than the physical units and worse in the magical classes than the mages. But I think a lot of people just kind of don't look at it wrong. Like, even in the tweets, one of them brought up, oh, he only has a 25% strength growth. Well, it is actually a little better than that. It's 35% personal, but that's 35% personal strength in mage. If you were to reclass Clanne to a physical class, his stats are actually pretty impressive. I don't think it's necessarily a good idea, but if you leave him as a level 1 unit, just don't use him in the early game, and then once second seals come online, switch him over to a physical class. His physical growth will be incredible, and he will easily keep up with the better physical units. I just don't think that's worth it.
Yeah, didn't you say at one point that theoretically evenly leveled Clanne levels with like someone like was like Marin or Panette or something stat wise on the physical side?
Yeah.
Obviously that's like ideal scenario for him, but
yeah, in the ideal scenario, Clanne, because I already mentioned before that given the same class pathing, Clanne will always be faster than anyone except for Fram. So if you do level him through physical classes that give a speed growth, his speed will be on par with like Kagetsu and Marin, while his strength won't even be that far behind them, which is a really good showing for a physical unit. It's a lot of work to get him there, and it's probably not worth it. But if you do like really like Clanne and just want to see him shine because he's voiced by the same guy who voices Deku, or because you like that he likes pickles or something, like absolutely go ahead and try out physical Clanne. It does work.
would you say it's higher effort than the magical classes because physical units just have a harder time in this game due to higher benchmarks on the enemies?
Yeah. So physical units in general have a higher time. There's also the fact that like he starts in Mage. You don't have to like do anything beyond that. Whereas for physical Clanne, you need to not use him until second seals come online if you want him to actually like perform well. But then a lot of it is just how much better magic is than physical combat. In broad strokes, if you actually were to take every single enemy in the game and compare their defense and check the magical and strength benchmarks for killing, it's only actually like 2 points lower for magic. The difference is the variance between different enemy types, because HP and resistance are inversely correlated on a lot of classes. Like if you look at any class with high HP, they will almost always, as a general rule, have low res, and any class with high res will almost always have low HP. So the actual magic necessary to one round like a general and to one round a sage isn't that far apart. But for physical units, that gap is huge. So it's a lot easier to get a magical unit to be able to one round just every enemy on a map than it is for a physical unit.
I did want to say when you said it's easier to keep him on low level when he's a mage at first, even if you're going physical. Is that really necessary for him? Can't you just take a couple of levels in mage and then reclass him? Or does that like hurt his internal level to promotion?
So it's the sort of thing where like if you're doing this anyways, like it's going to hurt his internal level while having him level with no boost to his strength or his speed. And so if you do that, he'll end up marginally worse for no benefit. Like his early game isn't so good that he's necessary. And if the goal is just, oh, I'm using physical Clanne because I want to max out Clanne, then like there's just no benefit to it. And it is a pretty notable it's a noticeable difference. Especially, I am assuming fixed mode, to be clear. Like we did bring up that, oh yeah, things will be different on random and fixed. I am just assuming that he'll be on fixed mode because
Yeah, I mean, even if we use
don't know
random
how
mode,
you
we kind
would
of have to go by
compare.
averages anyway, right? To assume what he roughly would like. So I
Yeah.
don't think it really matters in a general sense whether you're playing on random or fixed when it comes to what's a good idea and what is not a good idea.
So, like people know, like people say he'll be a little outshot by the other physical units. The difference is if you leveled him in Mage compared to if you leveled him in Mage and then reclassed to a physical class after promotion, compared to if you leveled him in like Axe Fighter or something, it's just 2 points of strength, which isn't a huge deal. But there's also the question of like, why not take the 2 free strength if you're doing this anyways?
Fair enough. I was just thinking you level up in Mage in the beginning to maybe get a couple points of speed in early so that when he's reclassing later, it's not as hard to level him up. But maybe, just thinking about this theoretically, maybe you just have to feed him kills anyway. Like you just have him last hit everything anyway, and that isn't as relevant as just his XP gain.
Right. Either way, if you do this, you're going to be, throwing Marth on him and just sort of force feeding him a little. So the couple extra levels in Mage aren't really going to do much for you. Especially because Mage doesn't even provide a boost to his speed either. Because Mage has 0 speed bump. So if you're going to do Physical Clan, you might as well just wait. But, like, again, I don't think Physical Clan is what makes him actually end up the best. I think Magic is absolutely the way to go, even though the 10% growth does look really bad.
Yeah, fair enough. We can get into the into his magical offense in a little bit, or rather, continue on that line. I just wanted to clarify real quick. When I said like get a couple levels for speed, what I meant is like you get him a couple of level ups already, so he's faster earlier. But like you said, it doesn't really make sense to do it that way. So yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Especially because if you do that, you're probably going to be going back to like the Jean or the Anna paralog for his early levels anyways. And those enemies will give him like half a level per kill, while also being so weak that even a level 1 Axe Fighter clan can kill them with Marth.
Ooh, that does seem fun though.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun to switch him over to Axe Fighter and then just get a million levels and get a bunch of physical stats, but I don't think it's optimal. It just sounds very fun, and if you like Clan, try it out sometime.
Come to think of it, it's like doing reverse Anna, right? Because Anna has the exact opposite problem when you think about it.
Yeah, it's definitely doing the reverse Anna, and I don't think Anna's worth it either, but it is fun.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about how fast Clanne is and how he can potentially fix his magic. It's probably good to round out that topic of his offense, because I also want to talk about his durability in a little bit. But maybe let's talk about what you do about his magic, because you already said you can forge maybe a Boganon, maybe a Levin Sword, and you can give him some kind of offensive ring. What is the best way to fix him overall, in addition to this?
So in the early game, I think the important thing is definitely promoting him to Mage Knight instead of Sage. And I think a lot of people, like some people were saying, oh, go Mage Knight for sure. But I think a lot of people do go Sage on him. And like I see the temptation there of like, oh, he has bad magic and good speed, so I'll put him into the slower, more magical class.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's just making him more like Saline, which I've already established her stat line isn't the way you want things laid out. So I think he's much better off going into Mage Knight to just max out his speed, and we can worry about the magic later. Especially because Mage Knight does give us a really easy and cheap way to fix magic, which is the Levin Sword. It's super cheap to forge, its stats are just incredible, and if you can double an enemy with Levin Sword, if you have even just Mage Knight's base magic, which every Mage Knight will have, you can put up some pretty impressive numbers, even if your magic is bad, like Clanne's is.
Yeah, didn't you kind of calculate that no matter who you are, as long as you're a Mage Knight, you can like one-round everything in a mid-game, like during the Soul Mark at some point?
Yeah. Assuming generic, if you have generic Mage Knight
Yeah, you
bases
kill
and
our
rows,
units, and if you level style, you get some generic Mage Knights. Sorry, go
yeah.
on.
Yeah, if you just had generic Mage Knights, you could sweep the majority of the Soul Mark because it is such a powerful class that its offense is just incredible no matter who you are. Clan does have an instant, easy way to get into it. All he has to do is promote. But the Levin Sword and Bolganon are just such good weapons, and the Mage Knight class itself is so fast that you don't really need personal stats to kill anything. They certainly help. Like, it's really helpful that Clanne has so much speed that we can just sort of go, okay, we'll forge you an expensive Levin... Well, it's not even that expensive to forge a Levin Sword, but we'll forge you up a Max Might Levin Sword, and now you can double things thanks to your natural speed, and then just kill them.
Yeah, fair enough. What kind of emblems and other kind of things can you give Clanne to make it better? Because I'm assuming during the early game you would probably give him either Celica for more magic and then maybe Marth for more experience.
Yeah.
But then what do you do beyond that?
So for early game, both Celica and Micaiah are magical, and they provide a ton of EXP. So you can use either of them to, get him to level 10, get him to promotion pretty easily. The issue is that Solm doesn't really give you great magical emblems. Like, first you get Lucina and Lyn, who are very strong, but neither of them provide any magic. And then you get Ike, who's obviously not very magical.
The opposite.
Yeah. And then you get Byleth and Corin, who are magical, but are a lot more support-focused, and so aren't really what you want to throw on your magical combat units. And then you finally get Erica, who's a good combat magical emblem. But for pretty much all of Solm, you're either working with, if you can find like a good bond ring, like a Lilina ring or something, or you're just working with like a +1 magic, +2 speed bond ring.
Yeah. But that's kind of like good for Clanne in a way, that he can just function with a bond ring without having to have an emblem ring on him.
Yeah, obviously he'd be better off with an emblem ring, but you certainly don't need one on your mid-game Mage Knight. Like, as I said, the Solm enemies are extremely vulnerable to Mage Knights, so they can function without a ring. And then late game, once the enemies start getting stronger, then you probably switch over to either Erica or Celica. Neither Erica nor Celica give speed, but that's not a problem for Clanne, that's only a problem for other Mage Knights, and they give the largest magic bonus of any rank.
Fair enough. Now, we've had a discussion, ranting a little bit about resource uses.
Yes.
Because, obviously to play Engage at all, you can't get around using resources. The resources are there and some of them you will use, but sometimes resources are contested and you need some kind of justification to use them, some kind of payoff, or you need to argue that there's no competition to begin with. So I want to get into that real quick. So we talked about having to raise him from the early game, which is a weakness some tweets brought up. Is like he joins at level 1, you have to train him. And during Alfred, we actually talked about how you have room to raise multiple units from the early game. So I want to ask, like, how feasible is it to train everyone you want to train in addition to Clanne? Like, how restricted are you? Because I remember you saying that you can train everyone you want and more than that. Like, there's plenty of room for resources, but some people think there's a limitation how much XP you can milk out of the early game. So can you use Clanne alongside a bunch of other XP targets like Alir, like Chloe, Alfred, Etier, Alchrist? I don't know. Like, how much room for XP is there?
So I think a lot of people here, like the LTCers and the super efficiency focused crowd, going, "Oh, this game's EXP is so tight," and then when they play the game and they see they get 13 EXP for a kill, they assume that's what they mean. But what those like LTC and trying to reach the turn floor playthroughs are running into isn't that there isn't enough EXP, it's that because this game is almost entirely kill boss, and because you get so much movement tech, if you're trying to reach the turn floor, there's zero reason to not just run up to the boss as fast as possible and kill them, which notably doesn't give you any EXP. But if you're not doing that, if you're just sort of playing the game casually, there is a lot more EXP than a lot of people think. And probably they don't think it because the EXP isn't where it normally is in Fire Emblem. Normally it's just you kill enemies, you get a bunch of EXP from that, you get stronger. In this game, a basic enemy kill only gives you, at equal level, 13 EXP, and it only goes up or down by about 4 if you're above or under leveled. But out of the first 4 rings that you get, 3 of them contain a massive EXP boosting source. And because this game penalizes you so harshly for being overleveled and benefits you so much for being underleveled, if you say you put Marth on Chloe, and then you take Chloe into Chapter 6, and you throw Marth on her, and she one-rounds everything on the map, and she just wipes everything out and gets a ton of EXP with Mercurius. That's gonna pump her up to what is essentially the level ceiling. And now, when you show up in Chapter 7, if you gave her the Marth ring again, she isn't going to be getting much EXP anymore because she's over-leveled now. So you have the opportunity now to take Marth off of her and put it onto someone else. But then Celica and Micaiah also come with major EXP boosters that you can also trade around to your people. So you have 3 EXP boosting rings and a really tight EXP ceiling. If you're not running up to the boss and killing them as quickly as possible, there's plenty of time to, even over the course of like 2 turns, set up like massive multi-mens with Micaiah or a great sacrifice. Or you can use the Celica ring to, kill 2 enemies in 1 turn with Echo, or to use the Recover Staff, which has the highest EXP yield of any staff in the base game. If you're trading around these rings, you can probably alternate them between like 6 or 7 people, but there aren't enough early game master seals or mid game rings to maintain 6 or 7 people anyways. So you have more EXP than the bottleneck for actually training units, which is early game master seals.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. The way I'm seeing it is that you just, if you were to focus your resources around a lower team of units, which is usually one of the better ways to play Fire Emblem, is to, focus your resources on like a very small group of units to make them overleveled and overpowered. But in Engage, that is kind of penalized by the harsh XP ceiling and XP penalty you get for being overleveled, if I understood you correctly. So the better way to get as much experience on people and to get as much level ups as possible, get as many powerful characters as possible, is to instead spread them out a little bit more, at least where XP is concerned in the early game. And then you can kind of do that. You can also just use 3 characters if you want, but there's no benefit to it from what I can see.
Right. And at least as far as EXP is concerned, when it comes to the actual bottlenecking resources, your stat boosters and your master seals and those things, those you probably do want to pick a couple units to just focus on. But as far as EXP goes, if you are playing at a casual level and, if you're killing most of the enemies on the map, there are so many ways to squeeze out like a ton of EXP with stuff like Mercurius.
Yeah. I thought it might be good. We've talked about Clanne's offense a lot, but something we might have neglected a little bit so far is, Clanne's defense. I've looked at his stats for a little bit. He does strike me as a bit of a glass cannon. Like, his durability doesn't look very different from Etier. And from what I can tell, there's not that many ways to fix bad defense in this game. Like, if you die, you die. You can't really HP tonic your way out of a kill very well. The only way I can see to make Clanne survive enemies is the way that fixes seemingly every problem in this game, which is Bonded Shield. So is that Clanne's only way to survive an enemy phase?
It's not his only way, but it's the best way. Like I said, his offense is at its best in Mage Knight anyways, which is already a Cavalier class, which is one of the classes that you can get 100% Bonded Shield with. So yeah, probably just using him as a Bonded Shield sweeper. You could maybe try something funny with Ike, especially if you take him down physical classes, but at the end of the day, like, Bonded Shield is so overpowered, like, why wouldn't you use it? It's definitely the best way to fix him. And the thing is that no matter what mage you use, that's what they're going to be using for bulk.
His Bonded Shield, right. So what I was thinking is that I guess that's the major striking point against Clanne and why he isn't like higher in the tier list, basically, because I'm assuming neither of us think he's like S tier or anything. So that might be his major striking point, is that he needs Bonded Shield to be next to him, which it's not going to hurt him if he wants to use Clanne at all costs, but I can imagine that needing Bonded Shield attached to you means that, for example, you can't use both Mage Knight Clanne being Bonded Shield and also Bonded Shield Flying Ivy or Flying Chloe, for example. That is something you cannot do at the same time.
Yeah, and that's definitely the thing that holds him back the most. You can only have you can have 2 Bonded Shield sweepers going if you really want, but it's not great. And that's definitely the thing that holds him back. He does have some advantages over the other ones. Like, for one, he is absolutely the fastest option for a Bonded Shield Mage. Then he also has... Alir is a great candidate to be the one to do this Bonded Shielding. And Clanne will always have... Everyone does support Alir, but it's... Clanne's always going to have that Alir support. And he has that personal skill that gives him some free hit next to Alir. And Alir's personal skill, which does the +3 strength, is going to be more useful on Clanne than a lot of other people. So there are some relevant benefits to using Clanne, but at the end of the day, like, he can't keep up with Chloe and Ivy, which is like, yeah, that's pretty tough.
Yeah, just for clarity, are we assuming that Alir reclasses to the same class line as Clanne, or is he going to be Dragon and doing a 90% bonded shield?
If you're using Alir for bonded shield, I think you want to go Wolf Knight or Griffin Knight for that. But you don't have to use Alir for it. I've used, Alfred and Clanne together, and it works fine. It's just Alir's a little better at it.
Yeah, fair enough. I think if I was thinking about like a potential playthrough where I'd be using Clanne in that manner, I guess what I'd be thinking about is, okay, then I have to use other units who don't need Bonded Shield, or who are okay being in that same class line, like having more Mage Knights basically, and then kind of just giving up on having a flying Bonded Shield to go along with it, because I don't want to rely on like 80%, 90% Bonded Shields, because I've tried that in Velxenolog, it did not work out for me.
Yeah, that is definitely sort of the problem with it, of he's forced to rely on Cavalier Bonded Shield because he does need Mage Knight's magic base to kill things. And then, there are other better options. But just because a better option exists doesn't mean it completely invalidates Clanne as an option. Because he's still, like, okay, yeah, he's a worse Bonded Shield Sweeper than Ivy. So is everyone in the game. Like, he's still better off than, a unit who isn't very good. If he can replicate what Ivy does, that's really impressive still, even if he's not as good as her.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make him bottom of the bottom tier if he's inferior to another unit. It just makes him inferior to that one unit, and then maybe by a couple tiers, sure, but not by the max. Where would you put Clanne, roughly, if you had to make like a tier list? If you keep in mind like the units we've talked about so far, like the mediocre Brodia people and Elchrist and Itier and stuff like that.
I don't know. I wouldn't put him very high. I think I would put him higher than Etier, just because, like, okay, like, being a Bonded Shield Mage Knight is pretty much the strongest thing you can be in Engage, and being like, the third or fourth best option for that is pretty darn good. I mean, I'd put him like in B tier, like higher out of B tier. I'd probably put him pretty close to Saline. Saline's a little better in the early game, but like I said, her stats don't scale as well into late game as Clanne's do. So I don't know, I'd probably put him around there. So that's probably like upper end of B tier for most people's tier lists.
Yeah, that seems fair, and way higher than I had him initially. I think I just dumped him into C tier, which is, as I said, my lowest tier that I had, because like most other people, I just ditched him from the early game because he didn't feel as good. But hey, now that I know Mage Knight is good, I have never tried Clanne long term, but I have used Anna, and I've noticed that enemies they don't see Bonded Shields, and if you have like a really fragile Mage Knight, they'll like suicide into them every single time, and it's honestly one of the best ways to just turn and engage into an enemy phase based game, which is super funny to me, because when I played for the hard mode on the first time, it was like all player phase. Like, I was just never doing productive enemy phase. But this is one of the few ways to actually turn it into an enemy phase based game, which is, I mean, it doesn't make Clanne super good necessarily, because like you said, you're going to use a generic Mage Knight to do it, but at the same time, it is one of the best ways to break the game, right?
And he is really well suited and really good at it. Because notably, unlike a lot of options like Ivy and Pendreo and those later game units, he does have a small advantage over all of them, which is that he joins before Chapter 10. So he'll have Canter, he'll have... he actually has an incredible starting SP. He has 300 SP at level 1. There is only a couple units in the game who have more SP than their starting level, and Clanne is one of them. So, like, yeah, you could use Ivy and Pendreo, and they are better at it, but Clanne is not as far behind as people think, and he does have the advantage of mid-game canter, which none of them do.
Yeah. What out of interest, what other skill would you give him? Would you give him something from the early game then?
Um, no, I probably want to. I mean, honestly, I'd probably end up giving him speed +3. Um, like I said, you can use your skill slot for a minor boost and your ring slot for a major boost. And if you're a mage knight, the only stats that matter are magic and speed. Nothing else matters because your bulk is invalidated by bonded shield, and tomes have such good hit you don't need to worry about hit. Plus, Clanne has crazy high dex anyways. So it's like all there is speed and magic. So put the tiny boost in speed and the major boost in magic.
Makes sense to me. Well, now I kind of want to play Engage again, even though I was taking a break from it. Well, shoot, I guess. I'm out of questions. Is there anything else we have to add to the clan discourse before it starts?
Yeah. I think I will just make it clear, I'm not saying Clanne is like better than Pendreo or amazing or anything. Because he does late game start to need Spirit Dust because his magic growth does eventually catch up with him. Which is a pretty major cost when those could go to like Chloe or one of these better sweepers. But it is worth considering that, like, if you don't have someone who you're planning to give the Spirit Dust to, and you want to use Clanne, if you stack his magic and you put him into Mage Knight and Bonded Shield him, he will kill everything in the game. He can definitely work all game long, which, like, a lot of people think that the early game units can't, but they really can. And Clanne even has some advantages. He's like better against Griffin Knights and stuff because he can actually double them. He's he's really powerful, even if he's not necessarily really good. And I think that's worth considering in a unit.
Yeah, it just sounds like he's much better off than a unit with a similar stat line would be in other games, because this game has so many ways to fix a unit that they can almost instantly become, maybe not top tier, but combat viable for almost the entire game.
Yeah, especially if you're a mage. If you're a mage, it is so easy to be combat viable all game long with no trouble. And Clanne has the choice to be a mage, so
Yeah, easiest path to becoming a mage / mage knight, and the tools to make it work. Seems fair enough. Anything else?
I think that's all I got. At least all I can think of for now.
Alright, fair enough. I'm sure the comments will enlighten us with anything else we have discussed. We have managed to bring up personal skill this time.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, thanks everyone for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Have fun trying out Clanne if you are just as inclined to do so as I am. And we'll see you next time. And Septi, thank you for joining once again.
Yep, thank you.
Alright, bye.